Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Angela Saavedra. I'm the director of the Center on the Hill, and it is time for another episode of Tell Me Something Good, now with special guests. I'm joined today by Austin Shelley. Austin, thanks for being here.
Hi,
And I'm
it's my
sorry,
pleasure.
I didn't ask for your official title before we started, so please tell us who you are.
Oh, I am let's see if I can get it right. I am the Associate Pastor for Christian Education.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. For those of you new to the program, we are going to be asking 3 questions from a game called Storywise. It's 144 thoughtful ways to bond with a fellow human. I pick 3 cards at random, and then we answer them, and you share your thoughts with us at the end. So without further ado, let's get started. Here's our first picture. You can see it's people working old school, like a filing board.
1970s.
Yep. And this question says, whether you think people work too much these days. And wow, that's a loaded question for me. I think when I first came out of college and started working, I didn't notice it as much. I'm sure people did. But then there was a point in my life where I had 6 jobs at once. And I think my total hours were definitely over 60 a week. And then as I started working in nonprofits, then it was that kind of time for just one job. At present, I work for the Center on the Hill. I also work for Allen's Lane Art Center, and I run a small theater and film company. So short answer, yes, I think I do. But I do really well of trying to eke out time for myself and time to really, rest and relax when I can. But I do think we all run pretty fast and hard at work these days. What do you think?
Yeah, that's such a tough question for me because, right now I'm part-time at PCCH. Technically, I'm like 20 hours a week. That almost never happens. I mean, like it's like closer to 30, but I try to keep it at 30, just to have some balance and sanity. And I mean, the hard thing is that, it's very easy for me to work a lot and to do the kinds of things that are behind the scenes that nobody ever sees. And so like you don't get credit for those things. But there was definitely a time when I was at PCCH, before my 4th child was born, when I was definitely working like 60-hour weeks. And I realized that was my choice. Nobody was telling me to work 60-hour weeks, right? Like, I was choosing to do that because I wanted to do an excellent job. I wanted, and I cared about the ministry. And so I could really easily fold that into, this is ministry. And so part of what I do is, all of what I do is a gift to God. And therefore it's okay for me to be a workaholic. And it really wasn't, because what ended up happening was that I was getting burned out and I was not sleeping well and not sleeping much at all. And so anyhow, with the advent of my 4th child and with starting a PhD program, I really had to take stock of the hours that I was working and start thinking like, is this actually a good example of what it should be to protect some Sabbath time, that we're not made to run like the Energizer Bunny, right? We are supposed to have time where we reflect and rest, and it's written like right there into the Genesis, one of the Genesis creation stories. So yeah, I mean there are dangers, and I think beyond just my own life, I think it's really interesting how we're starting to see more and more the inequalities and what we ask of the people who actually make very little, right? So we expect people in the service industry, for example, to like work and not to have the kinds of breaks that we know that everyone needs. So yeah, I do think we work too much. I think there are ways we can be smart about that. I know in Finland, I think they have like a 4-day work week. And I think some of the pandemic some of what we're learning in pandemic may help us with this, right? Like that it might be very possible for us to work from home, to instigate a four-day work week just because of not being exposed to other people in office buildings, which is one of the scariest parts of going back to normal, whatever that is. So yeah, I do. I think we work too much. I hope I'm not a vector of that for my kids. Like, I hope that I can be a better example of, I don't think balance really exists. I mean, I think that's a myth. But I hope that we can work toward it in terms of how we take Sabbath for ourselves and also advocate for Sabbath for others.
Yeah, that's great. I agree with all of that. Definitely. I need to take some of that advice to heart myself. All right, here we go with our second question. This will be you first. It's a beautiful sunrise. And the question is, where were you the last time you watched the sunrise?
Oh my goodness. I am not a morning person. I'm an owl, an extreme owl. You know, like there's a book called Brain Rules. I don't know if you've ever read it. John Messina, I think is his last name. I'm not exactly sure, but he talks about how people are like generally one of two chronotypes. Like, we are either larks, we either like to be up and productive really early and in bed early, or owls, you know, rolling out of bed a little later, but maybe staying up until 3 or 4 in the morning. Yeah. So also pandemic tends to like push us to our extremes, right? So like when we don't have the structures imposed by the world, like we tend to fall right into those patterns. So I'm an extreme owl. So if I see the sunrise, it's probably because I've been up all night. And in fact, that is the last time that I saw the sunrise. I was writing a final paper for my PhD program on a deaf interpretation of scripture, of the story of Jesus's healing of the deaf man, actually. And I was writing, trying to make the deadline. And I was sitting in this window dormer where I am right now. And I just, you know, I was stuck, and I took a minute and looked over, and I could see the sun rising, and I kind of, you know, leaned back in my chair like this and just sat and watched it for a few minutes. And it was a moment of remembering who I am and why I'm doing this. So.
That's awesome. I too am not a morning person, and it had been a very, very long time since I had seen the sunrise. But I actually remember when the last time I saw the sunrise was, because I remember thinking at the time, wow, it's been so long since I've seen this. And it actually was Easter morning. And it was total happenstance. I woke up kind of at like 4:30, and I wasn't feeling great. And I, you know, kind of got up, and I got some water and moved around the house a little bit. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to try and lay back down. And as I was walking to the bed, the window was open, and I could see right up over the trees, the sun starting to rise. And I thought, holy cow, it's the sunrise. Like, I haven't seen that in forever. And so then I did exactly what you did. I just sat down on the edge of the bed, and I opened the blind all the way, and I watched it slowly rise, and I took some pictures, and I, you know, thought about it, was like, wow, this is, you know, truly beautiful. And it was not lost on me that it was Easter morning. And I was like, this is really perfect. I think I was meant to see this, because I had been under a lot of stress due to the pandemic and everything that was happening. And I just kind of felt like, you know, however it worked, God whispered to me that it was time to get up for a minute and I might see something great. And I did. And it was awesome. And that was Easter. That was the last time. And before that, I think it's easily been 10 years since I saw sunrise. Like, easily.
I've done a lot of, you know, wee hours of the morning nursing of babies. So like, I think I've seen many, but usually under those circumstances, rocking a baby to sleep, writing a paper, something like that.
I'll do it.
It wasn't my choice any of those times.
Great. All right. So our last question, this gentleman's reading the newspaper. And this one says, how you get your news, TV, radio, newspaper, internet, etc. I have switched lately. I used to really rely on the internet for my news. And then I decided that that probably wasn't the best, particularly social media outlets. You have to really sort of gauge what's coming from where and what it is. And that just became very hard for me. So I really enjoy listening to NPR. I like the radio because I feel like they get a lot of different people reporting. And I'm also an audio learner. So it sticks with me a lot better if it's something audio. News visual is also helpful as well, but not as much as audio. So I'd say radio right now is my biggest way of getting the news, followed a close second by television, but I feel like television is so much marketing that I'm kind of in the same boat of like, I don't know that I really grasp a lot or always believe a lot of the things that I see sometimes pitched to me on TV. So right now it's radio. Back in the day, it used to be the internet, but I'm pleased to say I have shifted away from that. How about you?
Okay, mine is shifting too. I don't like television. I never really have. I read an essay a long time ago, like when my first child was a baby, by Barbara Kingsolver, and I think the title is called "The One-Eyed Monster and Why I Don't Let Him In." And she was talking about the fact that in raising her daughters, she was so adamant about not having a TV in her house. Now, my husband is a huge sports fan, so that particular like moratorium has never worked for us because he like wants to be able to watch baseball and basketball. I mean, sports pretty much year round. But so we definitely like have a TV, but we keep it to the one, and I don't get my news that way. Because like you, I just feel like there's a lot of like sound bites, sensationalism, and I would prefer to do what Barbara Kingsolver said that she did, which is, that people would ask her like, well, if you don't have a TV, aren't you scared you're going to miss something? And she was like, well, no, I can read the transcript. I can look it up if I want to hear a story, and I can read the transcript. And actually I'm getting a lot more that way than she does, I guess, as a person who probably is very print oriented, right? An author. So for me though, honestly, at this point, I do listen. I used to listen a lot more because of my commute. So I live near Princeton, and the church is obviously in Chestnut Hills. So there was like a good solid hour, and I could listen, all the way there and all the way home. And it was a really good transition for me to work and back to home. But even now, I'm really thinking about like, what is the role of journalism? And how are we savvy and responsible, not only consumers but like contributors to that, right? Like I'm contributing to journalism that I feel is responsible when I am choosing, for example, whether I'm going to read the New York Times or the Washington Post or whatever, listen to NPR or so anyhow, I'm still really thinking about all of that. I'd be lying if I said that some of my like aha moments, some of the eureka's of, I read articles on social media just like everybody else. And there are people that I trust that, like if they post something, I feel like I've already established a relationship of trust with that person, and therefore, particularly friends who are colleagues, who are pastoral colleagues, there are some people that I really like. I look toward their posts to gauge whether or not something is credible. So even my own relationships play into whether or not I think it's a credible source. So.
Yeah, definitely. Me too.
Like, it's so important though too to like not put yourself in a bubble.
Yeah.
Like it's important for me every once in a while, as much as it like is cringeworthy, to read and to engage and see what what publications I would typically disagree with are publishing, right?
Yeah.
It's good for me to know like how events are being reported in multiple arenas, because I think that helps us to critically engage the stories that come our way. And I think right now, in a time of literally, I mean, 2 pandemics, right? We've got coronavirus on one hand and just brutal systemic racism on the other. And I think it is imperative that we are like spreading out our gathering of the news so that we're responding to those pandemics, not only with our ideas, but also, like with our actions, with our confession, with our commitment. So yeah, it's an interesting time.
It is. I'm really pleased to see how, like you, a lot of people, even people I know, are transitioning the way they get news, because it is, you're right, we really do have to look at sort of the role of journalism right now, and in this moment in time in our world is so important. I mean, it's always been important, but right now in particular, and we really just have to kind of look at those ways. It's nice to see that there's some transitioning, there's people seeking out news in other ways, for sure.
Yeah, I just think people are thinking about it more, like, and that's a huge positive. That's hugely hopeful. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, thank you so very much for joining me today. Just to recap for those of you watching, our questions today were whether you think people work too much these days, where you were the last time you saw the sunrise, and how you get your news. Please share your thoughts with us. Join the conversation. Email me at msaavedra@chestnuthillpress.org. That's msaavedra@chestnuthillpress.org. And thanks again so much for watching. Thank you, Austin, so much for being here. It's been really great talking with you.
Thank you, Mary Angela. It was really fun. I really appreciate the invitation. So
absolutely.
Everybody be well. Blessings.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.